Уважаемые дамы и господа, дорогие коллеги, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, and our dear colleagues, и российская аудитория, и аудитория,
both the Russian audience and the audience who is talking English with us.
Fantastic session that is dedicating to transformation of the world from Vuca model to Bani model and about the challenges which business and business education face in accordance with that. And first of all, I'd like to introduce our participants. We have today a unique group of experts. Among the experts are Jean-Francois Manzoni, Rector of EFMD Lausanne, Eric Lamarque, the Dean of Sorbonne Business School, Professor Francisco Veloso, who's the Dean of Imperial College of London, Eric Cornuel, Director General of EFMD Association, and representative of Russian business, Vice President of SUEK Energy Corporation, Sergey Grigoriev. As a moderator, Sergey Myasoedov, the Dean of IBS Moscow of RANEPA University. So the world transfers to the higher level of uncertainty. And some of the researchers and futurists, they say that we have to move across this world with the model of Bani, because the world is becoming brittle with a lot of anxiety. It is becoming more and more unlinear, and it is becoming more and more incomprehensible. In fact, I'm ready to illustrate all that with the examples of my business school, because we're facing and feeling all that. But I consider it would be much better if I asked to share their experience our outstanding experts from different countries of the world. And so with your permission, I want to give the first floor to absolutely fantastic professor and rector of EFMD Lausanne, Professor Jean-Francois Manzoni. Jean-Francois, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sergey, and greetings to all of you from Lausanne, Switzerland. Delighted to be with you this afternoon. So I was asked to comment on indeed this world moving to a Bani world and the impact on executive development. I would like briefly to comment on two aspects. One is on the impact of the world on us as leaders of our own institutions, and then secondly, on indeed the impact on the executive education activities as such. First, in terms of our own role as leaders, I think the first thing that came to mind, by the way, is I had to check to see what Bani meant, because I had never heard of this. And indeed, it is all over the place. But I guess my view on this is the first thing we need to do as leaders is to stay calm. And to stay calm and to keep perspective. For most of us right now, thank God, no bombs are exploding. Nobody is dying of hunger. Again, for most of us, in some places, unfortunately, it is, but in most places it's not. And so, yes, the world has become faster moving. Yes, things have become more intense. Yes, we have to work harder than usual. Yes, there is more loneliness, there is more anxiety due to the fact that we're operating more online. But I think that one of the things that leaders need to do in this environment is to stay calm, to stay positive, and to stay grateful. Grateful that even though things are not going great, they're going better than they could be going. And so I think a key quality of leaders in these challenging times, whether they're Vuca or Bani, is resilience and calm and focus. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. As leaders of our own institutions, I think we need to keep things relative. Yes, things have become more challenging. Yes, we had to weather a big crisis. For us at IMD, who depend enormously on executive education and on people traveling, of course, the COVID crisis was extremely challenging, but it forced us to innovate. And at the end of the day, that's a blessing in disguise. So let me now talk about this innovation and talk about what I see changing now and in the next few years in terms of the field of business education. First, clearly from a content point of view, we have to take into account the times in which we live. And so obviously the acceleration of everything, the intensification of competitive pressure, the digital revolution, all of this, of course, is having implications on what we teach from a strategy perspective, or from a supply chain perspective, or from a digital transformation perspective. Clearly, those are very real changes in the external environment, and so that has an impact on the topics that are relevant for leaders that we train, whether it's degree programs or executive programs. The second aspect that is changing from a content perspective is the increasing focus on, call it sustainability, or call it ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Clearly, the world is becoming increasingly conscious that the business world cannot continue to work exactly the same way, because our activities are generating prosperity, but this prosperity, A, is not shared in a way that is inclusive enough, which generates pushback against the system, and also the system generates prosperity in a way that is environmentally unsustainable. In other words, currently we are borrowing our prosperity from the quality of life of our children and grandchildren, and the interest rate is going up. And clearly this is one of the fundamental dimensions that we need to reflect in our programs, again, whether they're our degree programs or our executive programs. So clearly the world we live in has an implication on the content of what we teach. I think also the world we live in has and will continue to have implications in terms of the processes that we use to communicate with our students. When this crisis started, we at IMD, as I said before, are very dependent on travel. So we had to be very, very rapid, very quick in adjusting. And we said to ourselves, we need to rapidly move to technology-mediated interactions. That's how we call this. We don't call it online, we call it technology-mediated interactions, because the key remains the interaction, but now instead of being face-to-face, this interaction is mediated by technology. So first, we thought that this technology-mediated interaction was, an acceptable second best. It was not great, but it was okay. And what we realized rather quickly is that in fact, it is a very, very good second best. We realized that we thought earlier we're going to be able to do 60% of what we do. Well, we realized we can probably do 80 to 85% of what we do. The one thing that we couldn't do was to generate experiential, real-time leadership development. That we didn't know how to do. But everything else we learned quickly to do via technology-mediated interaction. We had to work very hard at it. So it was not just let's get Zoom and let's do it. We had to learn how to use the technology, the medium, to create interactions, to maintain attention, also to split the sessions differently. So it was a lot of work, but we realized we can do 85%. then we realized that we could do more than 100%, meaning that there are things we can do in this new world where we connect via technology that we could not do before. We can be in touch with people over longer periods of time. We can bring in more guest speakers than before. You see, before, if I asked you to speak in my program, you would have to come to Lausanne. Now, you can be on Zoom for an hour and you're in my program. So it was also enabling us to connect with larger teams in different geographies. So we realized we can probably do more like 85%. Then we said we can then do more than 100%. And now we even know how to do the 15% that we didn't do. We have started using virtual reality in leadership development activities, meaning that you don't have to be all together. We send you goggles and we create a virtual reality where we observe exactly the same behaviors that we observed when we were doing experiential activities. So that's what we believe will happen in the next few years. We believe that technology is going to remain an essential component of executive development. We believe that it will also change the nature of classes because increasingly we will move one-way transfer of information.
Jean-Francois, one more minute only.
Yes, 30 seconds. To one-way, we will move one-way information transfer to asynchronous, meaning we will send you the video, and we will make sure that when we are together, it is to interact, to discuss, and not to have one-way information. Well, so let me stop here and hope that this indeed helps a little bit your thinking on these issues.
Thank you very, very much. I'm sorry, gentlemen. Let us try to keep now this within 6 or 7 minutes. Still, thank you. It was a great presentation, and using this opportunity, I have a pleasure to give floor to Professor Francisco Veloso from Imperial College of London. Welcome, Francisco.
Thank you very much, Sergey, and delighted to be here, and thank you for the invitation to contribute. I mean, I think some of the themes that you'll hear me talk about resonate well with what you heard already from Jean-Francois, and I'll try to complement some of what he says. But let me start with one thing to say. You know, we just started. We've been on the online delivery mode for some time. I mean, we've started about 10 years ago. This is something that Imperial has always been very proud of, which is to be at the cutting edge of technology and innovation. And that includes also the way that we try to do things in the way that we engage with our community. And you know, the forefront of that has been our global online MBA that has been on the market for some time and is, you know, very well ranked internationally and recognized for its quality. And we just started a cohort, you know, last week, and in that cohort, you know, the biggest majority of students are actually based in London, but the second biggest group is based in Africa. And the reason for that is because the GMBA, our Global Online MBA, actually connects two important elements that are at the heart of what we're seeing in some of this transition, which is flexibility and access. I mean, the students that are based in London, you know, they could come to campus and do our weekend or our full-time, but they want flexibility, and that's why they chose to do the online rather than do it physically. And then you have the students that are based in Africa and Middle East that, of course, are doing it from there because the amount of offering that's based in the continent at the quality comparable to what they can get with us is not quite there, and therefore they do it for access. And so this is something that's really, you know, already present there and has been dramatically accelerated what we've seen over the last few years because of COVID. And so in our case, you know, we've been offering digital, you know, education for, you know, for many years now, but that meant going from a few programs to have everything that we could do offered digitally. And that was certainly something that was a significant change. But precisely in line with this notion of flexibility, the way that we're seeing this going is actually to keep flexibility even in the way that things happen in the classroom. And so one of the things that we're doing now, and we will be doing in the future, is what we call this hybrid model, is this notion that we'll have things that are happening in the classroom, we'll have things that are happening remotely, and we need to find a way to combine the digital and the physical world in a very integrated and flexible way. And this is something that we see is going to be key for the future of the learning. In fact, for our own campus degrees programs beyond COVID, we've already decided that we're going to keep this hybrid platform as a basis to interact because of what we're hearing from the students about the importance of flexibility. So flexibility and access to be able to navigate what's happening around the world, and that you already heard from Jean-Francois, is certainly something that's quite important. The second aspect is to recognize that there's a lot of new players on the education that are entering. We have, big companies that are emerging or entering this space, from Facebook, LinkedIn, and entering on the educational space. We have new startups that are growing very fast and offering programs, degree programs, non-degree programs. We have, units of universities that are being spun off or bought or integrated. So there's a huge new ecosystem on the edtech, let's put it this way, element. And we need to realize as business schools that we need to be part of this ecosystem, and we need to have a strategy to integrate, to learn, and to reach out to this broader, landscape of education. And so, for example, at Imperial, we partnered with some OPMs to deliver programs with them. We do certain things with others. We're launching, third initiatives that are more synchronous with yet another partner. So there's a lot of learning that has to be done between what happens inside the business school and what happens outside, and the way that we connect, because this flexibility that I was talking about will also mean that it's not just going to be the business schools, it's going to be an ecosystem of delivery of education, of engagement, to be able to tackle some of these challenges that you've heard from Jean-Francois, be it sustainability, leadership, or others. And we need to be able to integrate and be part of this broader ecosystem. And that's the second aspect that I'd like to bring up. The third one is that the students are changing themselves, right? I mean, when you see the new generation of students that are coming, they're much more purpose-driven. They're hyper-connected digitally, but sometimes socially isolated. They still crave face-to-face. We hear that from all the students, but that tends to be more kind of mentoring, coaching, and they have very much a do-it-yourself kind of hacker mindset. They like to learn, they go and search for information. So the way that you think about engaging these students on the learning experience need to recognize the fact that the students have these different characteristics, and therefore the design of the learning process, the way that you engage with them, the way that you maintain their engagement outside of the classroom is all evolving very rapidly, and you really have to orchestrate very carefully these elements of what happens in the classroom, what happens hybrid, what happens outside of the classroom, and developing that is really, really critical. And the final comment that I'll make related to that has to do precisely with the role of technology that I think is already changing a lot, but it's going to change even more into the future. And you heard from Jean-Francois the example of using goggles with virtual reality to understand what's going on, and that's one example of technology. I mean, we've used the hologram for some of our classes here as well, with some of this idea of using technology. But what I really feel is already changing, but will definitely change the future of education in general, is the use of AI to support the learning process. We've started with our own global online MBA, where we basically have been capturing how the students engage and learn to help them better learn and better educating. And we believe that what we are terming precision education is going to be really a very important part of the future. And this is leveraging advanced technology to support the entire learning process, to understand how students learn, to understand how they evolve, and to help them be better learners, to help us be better educators, and to really support the entire learning process. I really feel that that's going to be a really key part of being able to navigate this future environment of learning and education at any level, be it degree or non-degree. And I think I'll stop here for now to make sure that there's opportunity for others to, leave you with these thoughts, and then if there's time at the end, we can come back to some of the points that I've just made.
Thank you very much, Franciscus. Thank you very much for a number of absolutely bright observations. And I hope that we shall have a little bit of time at the end to return to some of them. And now I have my honor and pleasure to give floor to Professor Eric Lamarque.
Hi, Sergey, you can hear me? It's clear? Okay, because I am in a room to make the course in executive education today. So my point, of course, I'm trying to add something to the two previous discussions. And I want to add, I think, to this problem of the Bani world and what we can do for our students. I want to add two questions to all the topics the two previous speakers have presented. When I look at the criteria which define the Bani world, and when I look to some papers or chapters speaking about what we have to do to manage, or to try to manage, or to try to adapt to this world, I saw things like to develop new capacities, to develop resilience, to develop transparency, and on this side we can think to the best art skills we have to teach to our students in executive education, like also in pre-experience education. And the second thing I want to see to the soft skills people mention when they speak about the Bani world, like empathy, like mindfulness, like adaptativity, intuition, things like that. So the problem we have is always the same, is how to develop the good hard skills and soft skills for people to be adapted to this world. And of course, all what the previous speaker have said is correct, speaking about technology, speaking about new digital tools to make courses, introducing, of course, ESG criteria, and so on and so on. Okay, perfect. But my feeling, and perhaps it's because I am in a whole university at Sorbonne, my feeling is also that people have problems actually in terms of anxiety, of terms of brittleness, in terms of low capacity to understand what happened. The problem is also coming that we are not teaching enough, I think, all art skills. Of course, I am on a very different point from the others, and my problem is to see in France, for example, but the level of people inside my programs on the basics, like in finance, like in marketing, like in human resources. I consider that the basics and the fundamentals are not always understood by people. So the problem, of course, is to integrate all the new topics and all the new change we observe in the environment. But we have also the responsibility to be sure that the people, after having a number of hours online or physically, understand really the complexity of the business, understand really the connection between the problems of marketing, finance, human resources, and so on. And I'm not sure that actually people who go outside after taking some time inside the program, I'm not sure they are able to understand everything in the Bani world. So of course we have to integrate many new things, but also I consider that the level of knowledge on basic tools in finance or management and so on are not always really considered or managed. The last thing I want to say also is what is the research strategy we have to develop to support the professor and to support the contents we teach in our courses. Because the problem today is when you make a course on the basis of results of research and practices we observe in the companies. And actually, the research we have is not on the topics we have mentioned. We have not many research on the consequences of climatic risk, of the integration of ESG criteria, on the integration of digitalization. We have not many research about how to adapt the management practices and the tools to this new world. So why? Because the main reviews are based on the analysis of existing world and not the new world. So I think we have also to reconsider how we make the research, what we do to be in a more prospective way and to teach again prospective things than to just do like we have done since the 20 last years. So this is my deep feeling to consider that, of course, we have to integrate many new things, but be careful that the students and the professionals who come in our courses and program also will be able to understand the complexity of their own company to be more adaptable, more flexible, and more able to integrate the new things.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I also expect that I shall have a chance to ask you at least one small extra question later. And now it's my pleasure and honor to give floor to an absolutely fantastic man whom I know for ages, outstanding Russian businessman, Sergey Grigoriev, Vice President of SUEK Corporation.
Well, thank you so much for such a generous introduction. It's true, though, that I've been knowing Sergey for years and years. However, thank you all, gentlemen, for having me on the panel, because one of the things we have to face when you work now in coal mining industry is that coal really becomes, in a sense, a dirty or a curse word, and you have to deal with it, and it certainly does affect our performance. However, you know, as much as the people become critical of certain things, we have to be aware of the fact that we're still thinking about the need to bring warmth and electricity into life. And half of Siberia, for example, is on coal, even though in Russia today the balance of coal is 14% only. Yet, this is the problem with education, business education in general. I think the gentleman on the panel will agree with me that if today we will be asked the question, which jobs will be in demand, let's say 6 to 10 years from now, I think most of us will be just guessing. We will all agree about experts in IT, but however, not everyone will actually become an expert in IT, and the more digitalization develops, the less human resources will be involved in the whole thing. There will be AI and everything managing the system. Yet what will happen to the rest of us and to the rest 8 billion people? There are problems that we have to face, because in terms of business education, there are certain models which we expect to be repeating themselves, which we know are efficient practices and which will continuously be used. However, more and more practices become outdated. They become no longer in need or in demand, especially in today's situation. One of the key issues is probably that we can blame it all on the pandemic. However, as far as I can see, the actual crisis affecting many walks of life had been developing prior to pandemic. It's the crisis of the existing economic model, and that as such, it also affects a major crisis in education, in educational standards, in educational approaches, in teaching, and first of all in trying to line up new set of ideals or ideas for the generation to come. Speaking of the generation to come, I have a feeling that even though we're all used now to using new technologies, not bringing people together each time, I think that you will all agree with me that a certain human touch or a certain element in education is being lost. I had been teaching in the past for a number of years, and I know what it means to maintain a personal contact or a personal touch with students, with a classroom or a smaller classroom, or what it means when you're just on a screen. I can see it on the example of my children. Maybe they're less lucky, but they're less motivated when all the teaching is being done and they sit by their computers and they hardly meet or socialize with their professors or their fellow students. And as such, it aggravates another thing. It has never been before like this when we saw such a wide gap in cultural standards affecting the generation to come. I think when, I believe so, honestly, that when we were kids, we did not have such a wide gap in terms of standards, approaches, philosophies, and basically in what we were taught by our best professors as compared to today's kids, because today's already existing digitalization, today's widespread of gadgets and gadget culture and so on and so forth leads to a certain turn or twist or whatever you call it in the thinking of a younger generation. But I guess the key thing here, and I heard it in a number of presentations, is the ability of a skillful educator, of a good professor, to attract the attention of the students, not to leave them demotivated, not to have them passive, and not to have them feel that they have no perspective for the future. I think the crisis which affects our being today is also a crisis, you will probably agree with me and probably not, of the existing economic model, because there are new demands and new requirements for advanced societies to live by. And I don't know if we're all prepared to face this or to deal with that, but we will have to deal with that, and that certainly is another major issue for us to look into. However, this is the case. Look, I started with this and I will come to an end saying so. Look at the coal mining industry. We need more labor, we need more skilled experts. Today's miner is not a miner with a hammer you used to see or with a shovel. They all work on highly computerized digital equipment, and yet the question you can see in the eyes of the generation to come is, will this job ever be needed? Will coal be ever required? So let's just start with coal and move to other issues. But we will find that many other skills or many other positions in various businesses may not be needed or may not be required. And yet, what do we do with these young people? Which values do we teach them and which skills do we give them? And how do we make sure that they're motivated to continue? Even though I have to agree that when we feel anxiety and uncertainty, we somehow transpass it to them, whether we like it or not. However, there's a big cultural thing, and I will end with this. When we live, we say that we understand that there will be no return to the past, that there will be a new reality. And We kind of agree with this, and yet, in our minds, generationally, we still hope that, one day things will come back to normal. One day things will somehow change to the better, because this is the paradigm which we used to live with, and we're happy with, and achieved something within. But there's a new generation. They do not even have an experience of the previous glorious past which we shared among ourselves. So what do they live with if they're not socializing, if they're not going out, if they're kind of more and more uncertain about the jobs or the professional skills that they need to acquire? This is a big question. This requires skills, but this requires also a major philosophic and economic and political and social thinking approaches as to how do we see the future. What will happen so that it doesn't happen to us as something chaotic and unprecedented. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I took too much time.
Thank you very much, Sergey. Thank you. And still we have time. We have a little bit more time than I expected. And it's my greatest pleasure, after several presentations of the representatives of International Business School from Switzerland, International Business School from Great Britain, International Business School from France, representative of Russian business, to give floor to the Director General of European Foundation for Management Development, and absolutely fantastic professor. I had a chance to follow him several times, to my old friend Eric Cornuel. Eric, if you please.
Thank you, Sergey. Thank you very much for this exaggerated introduction. I'll take 9 minutes, I believe. So when I prepared my speech, I had a look and I found an article, and this is the article, Stop Saying Vuca and Bani. And I must say I pretty agree with that, because these acronyms are more annoying than meaningful. Well, for sure, the pandemic left little choice but to throw us into a period of transformation and change. Disruption in the learning modalities unfolded, bringing digital platforms to the fore and sparking new innovative methods to further academic goals. It was not only a moment of accelerated tactical adaptation, but also of profound strategic reflection. One of the key issues is the return to the source of impact of business education. The disruption brought by the pandemic prepares ground for a new mandate, which looks at how institutions can have an even more positive impact on societies and ecosystems, and how they can integrate into them more harmoniously and effectively. Management schools and educators should not be passive observers. They must contribute more by addressing global challenges in an increasingly complex environment. And there are many global issues that need to be tackled with quite some urgency. You can feel the increasing tensions that exist today among a diverse range of people. Dangerous political phenomena are part of the equation. We notice an important disconnection between the political world and the rest of society. The Edelman Trust Barometer shows that trust in elites has eroded immensely, and people across all social strata have lost trust in politicians, big business, financial institutions, and the media. A lack of leadership in political and business governance result in the rise of anxiety, stress, unemployment, and social defragmentation. We risk seeing even more disenchanted citizens of all generations forming a precariat or precarious proletariat, so well described by Guy Standing. These are people who do not enjoy stable employment, rising income, and a sense of belonging. This growing precariat is coupled with a shrinking middle class, very well described by the elephant chart by Branko Milanovic. Another important phenomenon is the stall of economic mobility across generations. The next generations are not moving up the income ladder, which was a perceivable trend since the end of the Second World War. We must correct by taking meaningful and strong action against the dominant, at least in practice, shareholder value model. In fact, the shareholder value model is more recent than the stakeholder one, which emerged actually, funnily enough, in the United States at the end of the Second World War. At this time, people embraced a much broader role of cooperation, and this ethos comes back to the mainstream discourse now, and for very good reasons, in my opinion. One of the critical issues for companies as well as organizations just like ours is to raise awareness and embrace a cohesive ecosystem approach. But of course, this will require a paradigm shift. Our business education model favors academic research loosely coupled with societal needs. Tervish and Ulrich from the Wharton School calculated that the cost of a Nature journal was approximately $400,000. Despite these immense amounts pouring into the system, there is still too much disconnection between research and business practice. There is an emphasis on quantity over quality and novelty over replicability. We are spending a lot of time writing papers with unclear value to practice and sometimes, frankly, knowledge. Sadly, the main motivation is often to be published in a journal that a narrow circle of peers read, not to contribute to a better management of organizations and societies. We have, of course, a scientific mission, but a societal one too. The academic impact and rigorous research are very important, no doubt about it. But we also have a vital societal responsibility. Being uniquely positioned at the intersection of social science, technology, and business, we can contribute immensely to solving global and complex challenges such as climate change, rising inequalities, international isolationism, eroding democratic systems, and the spread of fake news. The dominant research model must evolve fast. Otherwise, we may go from publish or perish to publish and perish. We need to move towards an open system instead of an atomized intellectual endeavor that is constrained to narrow academic circles. We need faculty members to be engaged in and rewarded for applied projects, multidisciplinary research, innovation in teaching, engagement in society and communities. We need more engaged professors, as Andrew Pettigrew calls them. This is precisely a vision that we support via the Responsible Research in Business and Management Network, initiated by Anne Sui and supported by many renowned scholars. I, of course, realize that the entire ecosystem, including business schools, funding agencies, rankings, and accreditation bodies, have a role to play here. The digital revolution and rapid hybridation of learning experience has accelerated interesting phenomena that may pave the way for the future. Sorry. We may envisage a repository or share of shared learning resources across business schools across the world, and in a sense, rehabilitate the role of faculty, who instead of conveying fundamental knowledge, could devote this time to in-depth discussions and development of complex skills of students and participants. In other words, we don't need 100 introductory courses in accounting, but we need graduates who can think critically of a potential impact of their marketing campaigns on the trust in democratic institutions. Lifelong learning means not only reskilling and upskilling, but also an opportunity for nurturing a closer connection between alumni and their alma mater. The faculty could enjoy a coaching and mentoring role, advising on career choices and leading intellectual exchange that goes way beyond the moment of graduation. And here there is a great role to play for business schools to set the strategic compass in motion. We can be a central node in an ecosystem linking higher education institutions, business, and society. But I also realize how challenging and brave it is for many business schools to be at the forefront of change, operating in a complex system of stakeholders with sometimes conflicting interests and dynamics. The COVID crisis makes it more important than ever to take a more global approach to recovery. We need more international cooperation and a greater emphasis on societal issues, instead of inventing new meaningless acronyms like Vuca and Bani. The question remains, is this a credible scenario? Is there room for optimism, or will the political and economic agendas of the few push us towards a wilder capitalism driven by opportunistic leaders? I hope for the former. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric. Still, gentlemen, we have about 9 more minutes to finish our discussion. And so I wanted to ask you one provocative question. If out of all the problems you have at your business schools, companies, associations, you could choose 3, just 1 to 3, and to enumerate them by 1 or 2 sentences. What are the major 3 problems which you'd like to settle in your organization within the Statute 2022? And with your permission, we shall follow without preparation with the previous consequences, and I want to give floor and to ask to outline 3 major problems which Professor Francesco Veloso see as the most important, and to ask him to enumerate them.
Thank you. I think there are three elements. One is access to talent. I mean, the competition for talent has just become dramatically, and in particular, and this is building on some of the comments that my previous colleagues did, and also on the point that Eric just did, finding the right kind of talent, which is really difficult because it's a talent that wants to engage in education, be at the forefront of research, but also be impactful in the world. Getting that talent, developing that talent is really, really difficult and a major challenge. So that's one aspect. The second aspect relates to the sustainability challenge. And, we know that the business schools have an important role to play here. And in particular, we feel as part of a major technical, engineering school and science school and medical school that can contribute to that transition in an important way. And I really feel that finding a way for us to mobilize the capabilities that we have inside an institution like Imperial to really be able to contribute in a very meaningful and significant way to a more sustainable world through not new business practices, to new models, to accelerating new technologies that are on the lab now and can make a huge difference into the transition to a more sustainable future. That's a second really, really important aspect. And then the third one is, I would say, to find the right balance between several aspects that were mentioned throughout the discussions here. Is this balance between, a more tech-driven world and how it's changing everything that we do, but to do it in a way that we don't lose the human touch, that we don't lose the human dimension, that we don't lose the empathic elements. Because if we lose that, we lose part of our humanity, and I think we also lose some of the roles that we can have as educators, as developer of talent and young people. So those would be my three elements that I'd like to share with all of you.
Thank you very much, Francesco. Thank you very much. Sergey?
Well, I'd say that I would very much agree in certain aspects here with the previous speaker. First, I'd say not just search for talent, but it's also search for leaders or the emergence of new leaders. I mean, there still will be, whether we want it or like it or not, there will be a generational change. But under these new conditions, how do we emerge? How do we select? How do we facilitate emergence of new leaders? And who are these new leaders and these leadership skills? That, I think, is a very important issue. Second big issue, I think, in general, and this was, I'm very happy that I didn't say, but the previous speaker mentioned that, Mr. Cornuel. I think there's a key issue here. How do we treat the economic model, the existing economic model? Do we consider it fair? Will this new generation to come consider it fair? Do we basically agree with the fact, which I agree with the concept that we will see a shrinking middle class on the one hand, and we will also see lower incomes and lower levels of consumption? I think we all have to agree with this, and there's something we need to deal with. Third aspect is painful for us, but I think that relates to the whole world. How do we see whether we facilitate or not facilitate immediate implementation of this whole green ideology or green transition? It is nice to live in a world with clean skies and green grass and everything is positive, yet how do we consume, how do we generate electricity? How do we warm up regions like Siberia or the Russian Far East? What do we do next? Where is the right balance between these approaches? Those are three major challenges that we need to discuss. We shouldn't lose this whole green transition idea, but how do we adjust it to real life? Sorry if I spoke longer than I was supposed to.
Eric, just 2 minutes only to you.
No, I agree with my colleagues. I mean, what they have said, I fully agree. So if I turn it more to the business school world, since they open up the field, the first point I would like to say that I insisted on the stakeholder versus shareholder. Well, it's not a question of putting the shareholder value in the garbage can, but I mean, we must change the fundamentals here. And if we don't, I mean, we will all be in trouble. I remember when I was on the HEC Paris faculty, I remember the slides of some of my colleagues saying that the only objective of strategy is to maximize the share price of the company. I've never been able to swallow that, and I think more and more it's not going to be possible, and this is what we have to teach people. Well, I think the second element would be the heuristic dimension of research. When you look at how much time we invest in research and the outputs, I think we really must change. Otherwise, society will make us liable for that. And the third element for us, a very big challenge, is the profile of the future faculty members. I mentioned from my friend Andrew Pettigrew the expression the engaged professor. I mean, with very different characteristics. I mean, being able, of course, to publish and to have a scientific rigor, but also be engaged in society, be able to do the after sale, what I call the after sale for graduates, etc., etc. So reflecting upon this new profile is very, very important, and it goes much further than technology.
Thank you very, very much. Gentlemen, our time is coming to the end, and within half a minute or a minute, I just want to say thank you for our great enrichment through sharing. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for cooperation. And using this chance, once again, I congratulate you with the new year, and in Russia for so-called Old New Year, which we celebrate tonight. Best wishes to you, good health. Let us cooperate and let us move forward together. Thank you very, very much. See you in future again. Thank you.
Спасибо. До свидания.
Thank you.